So imagine with me. We're here at the 6th Sunday of Lent, and imagine that you have truly been walking the Camino de Compostela every day of Lent for weeks. Your hiking boots should be worn in by now, maybe worn out. And your body has reorganized itself around the rhythms of travel, the early mornings, the following of the yellow arrows along the path, the heavy pack, the blisters have become calluses, the strangers are now your companions. And then one morning you come across the crest of a hill and you see off in the distance the towers of the great cathedral of Santiago, your destination. They call that hill Mount 𝐑𝐞𝐯𝐝. It's Hill of Joy. Pilgrims have stopped at Mount 𝐑𝐞𝐯𝐝 for centuries to get their first glimpse of the end of their journey. And it was very treacherous in olden times. You know, you wrote your will before you went on the Camino, because you might not make it. Even today, 10 to 15 people a year die on their journey on the Camino. So when you see those towers, you know you're going to make it. Hill of Joy. But it's interesting how pilgrims describe those moments as they're coming up to the city gates, because they don't say it's a triumph, they don't say it's a pure joy, they say things like, I had a good cry and then I curled up with my backpack on the ground. Or another said, we clutched each other with joy and loss and loneliness and the relief of human connection all at once. A 4-time veteran said, at this point I enter a bittersweet state because I know I'm near the end of the journey. Arriving at our destination isn't always like we thought it was going to be. It can be more wonderful and harder and stranger than we thought. The destination is real, you can see it, but you're not there yet. You might feel the thrill of accomplishing the journey. You could be anticipating home, back to your own bed and comforts. Perhaps you've learned a great deal about yourself. You've made some remarkable friendships, but now you're going to part. What happens when the pilgrimage ends and you go back? And you realize that maybe you haven't figured out the meaning of life, the universe, and everything as you thought you might. Returning to the real world, it's bittersweet. In Jesus' day, they made pilgrimages as well. They went to Jerusalem. They went there for the high holy days to fulfill their religious aspirations. And it's so interesting that here in Luke's Gospel, they actually begin up in Galilee in chapter 9, and they arrive now at the gates of Jerusalem in chapter 19. There's 10 chapters, and it's a Camino. They begin in Samaria. Jesus tells the parable of the Good Samaritans, and they meet lots of people along the way, the 10 lepers and blind Bartimaeus, and they've just passed through Jericho and seen Zacchaeus up there in the tree. All these stories we know. 40% of Luke's Gospel is a pilgrimage from Galilee to Jerusalem. And now they're at the Mount of Olives, which is a similar moment as hitting Mount 𝐑𝐞𝐯𝐝, the Hill of Joy, because from there they're going to see the first stunning view of Jerusalem. Maybe it was the only time you would ever see it in your lifetime. And you would see the great temple you'd be looking down on it. And so the pilgrims would come. And in those days, you didn't just stop and take a picture and then go to the gift shop. Actually, they went through a lot of ritual purifications when they got to the Mount of Olives, which is probably a good idea if you've been on pilgrimage for several weeks before you go into the holy city, right? You got to clean up a little bit. But it's also a ritual purification. And before the Passover, they'd slaughter a red heifer up on the Mount of Olives. And it had to be red. I don't know why, but it was red. And maybe this explains that Luke spends so much time talking about donkey procurement. Did you find that odd? All this about, it's got to be this kind of donkey, and you go, and this is what you say, and then they say it, and then you say it. And it's a lot of time for the donkey. And I think it's showing how important the symbol of the donkey is, but also the donkey has never been ridden. It is also ritually pure and ready for the journey into Jerusalem. So it's helpful to see the view of where Jesus and the disciples are. And Violet can get that up for us here. And you'll notice this is the view from the Mount of Olives. And you can see over here, you can see the temple. That's, well, in modern day, but in the old day, you would see it. The view across is pretty spectacular, but notice what's in front. Do you see all the stones? Those are graves. The whole side of the Mount of Olives is a vast graveyard. Some are very ancient, over 2,500 years old. And the tradition from the prophet Zechariah is this mount is where the Messiah will appear and the resurrection of the dead will happen. That in that day there'll be an earthquake and the mountain will split in two and the graves will open and everybody will be raised from the dead right here. And you know, people paid a lot of money to get buried there, to get the front row seats. You know, if you got more money than you know what to do with, you might as well spend it on some entertainment in the afterlife, in the great reopening of all the graves. I mean, you want to be there, right? So Luke 19 is locating the processional that we just read about coming to this point on the Mount of Olives and leading through the graveyard. No palms, but Luke is going to strip down this story to its essential. Just the donkey and people's cloaks on the ground. And these two symbols, they work together. The donkey, an ordinary beast of burden, not the fast and impressive galloping stallion or the war horse, not the tremendous load-bearing camel of the caravan. If you saw a man riding a donkey into Jerusalem, you're not going to think, hey, there's the guy that's made it. What a real conqueror, the greatest of all time, right? No, it's a humble beast of burden of the common people, that the sure-footed donkey could make it through the rugged hills. But the donkey also has some symbolic power. In the prophet Zechariah, wrote 500 years before, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion, your king comes to you, triumphant, victorious, humble, riding on a donkey." Now, we often stop there, but the next line, I think, is even more important. He will cut off the chariots of Ephraim and the war horses from Jerusalem. He shall command peace to the nations. This is more than just an act of humility. Zechariah says, this king will come already disarmed of the power of the weapons of war. No war horse, no chariots. The weapons of empire are surrendered before he enters the gates. Of course, in the ancient world, the chariot was the tank, the war horse, the symbol of power, bred for battle, conquest. The donkey means the end of war. Jesus isn't just coming in peace. He comes deliberately undoing everything that military power represents. So this coming into Jerusalem is not just a soft gesture of humility, but it's something maybe a little bit more provocative. It's a counter-coronation. A different rule, God's hopeful rule that is different than the powers that be. He's saying it with his body. He's saying it with this borrowed animal as he is now going to descend through the graves of the Mount of Olives with his pilgrims throwing their cloaks beneath him. This is what God wants. The leadership, the message. Not armor, not the war horse, not the thunder of the imperial procession, but a donkey. Luke spent so much time on getting the donkey, but notice he doesn't say hardly anything about why the cloaks. This seems more of it's a spontaneous gesture. It's not a command. Jesus didn't say, take off your cloaks and throw them down in front of me. It's unforced. It's an act of vulnerability, of honor, almost a surrender. It's your essential garments that people could wrap it in a number of different ways. If it was hot, they could put it over their head, or they could protect from the rain. They could wrap themselves up to stay warm in the night. In the Mosaic law, a creditor couldn't take a person's cloak. You couldn't take everything from them. People had to have at least the dignity of their cloak to stay warm at night. It was essential. Everyone needed dignity and protection. If you took your cloak off, you just had kind of a thin tunic underneath. It's almost the equivalent of really kind of being naked in public. So you can imagine all these people out there taking off their cloaks and throwing them down in front of the donkey. It's quite a scene. It's kind of scandalous, really. And just let this sink in. You're going to take off your cloak. You're exposed. And again, it's not for Jesus to walk on it's the donkey hooves. And they can't just go to the dry cleaners afterwards. The power of the gesture is in part because Jesus didn't ask for it. It's freely given. Why did they do it? Were they among the hungry who were fed? Were some of them healed by Jesus? There were fishermen who left their shores and have been following him for 3 years. There are women, Mary, Martha, Mary Magdalene, who have been given a sense of respect and dignity that women usually don't get in the culture. There's Matthew, The tax collector who left his lucrative business to follow this man on the donkey. People who experienced grace, whose lives were made purposeful. They were all there, and they're throwing their cloaks on the ground. It might be gratitude and respect, but maybe it's also a recognition that as he rides past them and past the graves, he's going to get in a whole lot of trouble. So it's near the end of the Camino. There's this joyful expectation, relief, uncertainty at what's going to come next. But they believe. They believe in this man who rides the donkey. And in Luke's telling, it's then that the Pharisees say, "Teacher, order your disciples to stop. Quiet this. Tone it down. Don't make a scene." And if we follow Jesus long enough, we're going to hear those voices too. Be reasonable. Don't make waves. Keep your faith to yourself. But Jesus says, I tell you, if they are silent, the stones will cry out. The stones, these stones, gravestones, will shout. We've seen it. This kingdom, this way of peace, this laying down, this strange and vulnerable love cannot be silenced. It is already alive and will continue and is still calling. Is calling us to trust in this man on the donkey, calling us to lay down what we carry, calling us to keep walking even when the road turns hard. So here we are. We're on the hill, close to Jerusalem. We can see it. And the question is, will you join the shouts? Will you join the song? Or will the stones have to do it without us? Amen.